Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good break. I am Jennifer Azara. I am the managing editor of Sports Business Journal Tech, and we are here for session 3, which is hyper-personalizing the sports fan experience. Thrilled to have all 4 of these gentlemen on. We had a pre-call last week. They know their stuff, believe me. We have obviously Adam Azor, Sportradar own, and then followed by Chris Thorman from Monumental Sports, Evan Shlissel at Tipico, and Rich Routman from Minute Media. I'm going to have everybody go down the line, give the audience a little bit about what it is you do, and in the spirit of this session, since we're talking about hyper-personalization, if you could tell us if we were to hyper-personalize the sports experience for you as a fan, what is your nichest sports interest? So Adam, we'll kick it off with you.
Thanks, Jen. Well, firstly, it's great to be here and great to be alongside such a cracking panel on a really interesting topic. So I'm Adam. I lead global marketing at Sportradar, and getting straight into the niche sports targeting. I am, from my accent, you may tell, a Brit, and I'm a big Premier League fan. My team is Southampton, one of those strange people in the Premier League who supports their home team. And I have a specific passion for 90s Premier League is where my great love of Southampton and Premier League came in. So that's my specific targeting for me.
My name is Chris Thorman, and thank you all for having us here. Really appreciate it. I am leading the direct-to-consumer business at Monumental Sports Network. That's all things digital for the TV network, our site and app and content and acquisition and all fun things like that. Got a 90s theme like Adam. My hyper-personalized sports segment would be 90s baseball players. So just reciting those after.
I love baseball as well. My name is Evan Shlissel. I'm the head of acquisition at Tipico. Tipico is a challenger real money sportsbook and online casino operator. And I would say my niche sport, I'll go ping pong, since I'm in the city now, don't have the suburb life of your traditional sports, so I need to get to bars to definitely find my sports niche.
Awesome.
Rich Routman, president of Minute Media. We sit across creation, distribution, and monetization. Brands like Sports Illustrated, the Players Tribune, STN Video, and a number of other things here domestically and otherwise. I'll stay on the 90s theme and go with 90s college basketball for sure, especially around March Madness. I was gonna say Savannah Bananas, but I'll stick with the 90s college basketball theme.
Fantastic. Unlike last panel, no one's going to say they weren't born in the 90s, correct? We're not going to have that. I think many of you, like me, woke up this morning to the news of Google's announcement regarding third-party cookies, and as this was something we were going to touch on anyway, I think it makes sense to have Adam kick us off to kind of level set and give us his insight on today's announcement and the implications, and then we will jump off from there.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, and thanks, Ty, right? Good. We've got Ty here from Google, so definitely a theme which is going to kind of steer the conversation today. It is the elephant in the garden, as we're here in Madison Square Garden. And look, it's a really interesting topic, and someone asked me, what do I think about it? I said I thought it was the most shocking news that I'm less shocked to hear. And that's the way I kind of frame it up, in the way that this is a topic, a theme that for the last 4 or 5 years has been dominating all marketers in certain degrees. This was something that was meant to happen years ago, and it kept getting delayed. My hunch was I thought it was going to get delayed further, but being cancelled is very, very interesting. But if we take a step back of what does that mean and look at the underlying drivers of the decision and what the actual topic was related to, there isn't a great deal of change. And what I mean by that is the behavior of people and attitudes to data and privacy has changed and evolved since the birth of the cookies back in the 1990s, on the 90s theme. So that is still a change. And actually, if you look what Google have said about the announcement, they're taking a very similar path to how Apple took with Safari, is sort of their phase 1. And we know where phase 2 went, which was ultimately then the phasing out of the cookies. So it's going to be interesting to see what this actually means in practicality, what behaviors and people do when it comes to opting out. But the real hook for me is actually coming back to the theme of this topic, which is hyper-personalization. And what we all need to be really clear about is there is no hyper-personalization, accurate hyper-personalization, without first-party data. It does not exist. Third-party cookies cannot achieve that. And this isn't an abstract theme about the future we're looking into. This is now. Anyone who's on Netflix, YouTube, anyone who's engaging with content is in shopping on Amazon is having a personalized experience, user experience right now. So that behavioral change has happened. And sport plays a very unique role within first-party data because sport has this currency of passion. And passion is the value exchange for first-party data. So we've all been on this race. We've been running a race we're all going to finish at the finishing line at the same time. Now, the finishing line has been taken away and we're still running. Now, the risk is apathy. The risk is everything's fine now, we just kind of go back to how it is. That isn't the case. To shape the next 10 years, from a rights holder and from a brand perspective, first-party data is as important. And sport has the opportunity to harness that. We firmly believe that. We launched a revolutionary technology, Sportradar Fan ID, early this year to really tap into this opportunity. I don't expect a material change. I just say it's more imperative now for everyone in this room connected to sports and the sports ecosystem to capitalize on it. Apathy will be the biggest threat to achieving the future.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, show of hands. I mean, we discussed this at a Brand Innovation Summit last month in June too, how many companies had already started to put plans in place to figure out what they were gonna do when third-party cookies were removed. Show of hands, informally, if you're comfortable. How many have already put an action plan in place or taken steps to harness more first-person data? So, following Adam's advice, I would say keep it going, and the rest of you, it's despite this morning's announcement, it's time to definitely get some plans in the motion. When we had our prep call last week, Chris had an excellent analogy that he used to kind of address this issue within his own company, and it would be fantastic if you would share that with everybody.
Sure. It was actually a digital offsite a few weeks back, and a lot of people who in our company who weren't directly involved in digital. So I was trying to explain to them why we didn't really have a lot of source information for some of our subscriptions, a lot of our visitors, things like that. I was really struggling with kind of how to explain that to some non-digital folks, and then just came up with the analogy of, imagine you're hosting a great dinner party, you're having lots of guests come, they sign a guest book, they have their name, let's say they put their email address, let's say they actually write a little bit about why the party was good, or why they liked it, what they enjoy, maybe what they like to drink or eat. That really helps you, that guest book really helps you plan for the guests to come back and find other guests and things like that and really give them like a really great experience. Third-party cookies are like the communal guest book for every other party in the neighborhood. You get to view what people had at other parties, you get to see what they enjoyed, what they didn't like perhaps, you're gonna get their information. And even perhaps most importantly, you have information about customers and partygoers before they get to your party as well. So the analogy was using that was what was essentially was being threatened was all of that other information about all your other guests. That said, like you said, Adam, regardless of the news this morning, we would still want to build out our own guest book information as much as possible, and banking against the future, but also just that's the most actionable data as well as that first-party data. So just this guest book analogy really let the rest of our company just kind of click a little bit on what the big challenge was. And like I said, that said, we're still going to be trying to grow the efficacy and amount of data we gather first-party and third-party overall.
I want to go to Chris's parties, by the way.
Absolutely.
They sound fun.
There we go on the guest list. Taking that concept, going a little bit further, talking about data and how you can really go beyond demographics. I mean, at the fireside chat this morning, we talked about originally when you talked about personalization, there were 5 buckets, and you just wanted a fan to be able to be placed in one of those buckets, and how we've gone so far beyond that now, which means obviously collecting more than just demographic data. So what other aspects of fan data do you guys feel is important in order to get a really accurate profile of a fan?
Yeah, I mean, it ranges. There's obviously significant ranges of data, right, beyond demographic data. You can look at behavioral, you can look at psychographics from an operator perspective, right? If you're thinking about behavioral data, you're talking about bets placed, the frequency, the stake, the type, the sport, the league, the device, iOS or Android, right? There's a lot of different ways to think about behavioral data. Psychographics, you're thinking about more like risk tolerance of a bettor, their values, their lifestyles, their interests outside of sports. There's just a million different ways to cut it up. Engagement data as well, right? So when you're thinking about engagement, the features, the markets, how they engage with content, right? News, how they engage on social media, what time, what day of week, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can expand beyond specifically demographic data. So those are just a few examples of buckets.
Anybody else have anything to add on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, it's a combination of, it has to be both art and science. You know, I think obviously there's been a lot of talk around AI, and it plays a role in a lot of our products and technologies, but we need to have something sticky enough for people to want to give us their information. It really starts there. If our product is not extremely sticky, if we're not giving them exclusive access to X, Y, or Z, or they get to, as a result, unlock A, B, and C, we're asking for information from a user who prefers to be anonymous. All right, so I think that when you talk to the leagues, NBA ID is very important. NFL Plus is important. They have content that is interesting to that individual to then unlock that data. I think on the media and publishing side, which is where we operate most of the time, it's finding areas that we can unlock value that a user would ultimately want to give us their information. You're not going to do that with breaking news.
Yeah.
You know, the majority of sports content in our industry is relatively free. Right? And when you go to a site, you have to accept the cookie policy. It's one of the most annoying pop-ups you get when you go to a site to begin with. So I think that for us, it's finding strands of content, strands of either experiential platforms that we can bring to the market or otherwise that give people a reason to decide to then, okay, my name is X, Y, and Z, I live here, this is what I enjoy, and we can then start to customize the experience as appropriate.
And just on that, the point around the additional data points, you know, context is ultimately what we're talking about, Jen, in regards to that area. And I think there is a fusion of two different aspects, and this is where sport is really interesting, because you've got the depth of data on the sports fan, but then you also correlate that with sports data of what's actually happening. And this is where the combination from a rights holder, from a league perspective, works in terms of a brand's perspective, right? Because if you think about the sports fan as someone who's going to buy a product or service and put it into a realistic context, right? We're in New York, let's talk about the Knicks. There's a Knicks game coming up on Friday. If we know that person's a Knicks fan and we know where they consume sport, we probably know where they're going to be watching that game. So from a brand's perspective, let's say you're Molson Coors, you can target that person contextually about the opportunity to sell them beer for that game. There's the halftime, so it's DoorDash, it's Uber Eats. They can get the halftime pizza around it. If they win that match, and maybe they're going to go play Chicago in the next round, the flight airlines can target them contextually with that information. The hotel bookers can then get that area. This is where the access is enabled only by first-party data. That combination, that fusion of data points is unlocking the commercialization available when it comes to advertising.
Yeah, I think the only challenge there in that segment is that scale still matters. And, you know, when you're getting investment from a brand because they want to be across your content or media operation, and depending on who you talk to in the publishing realm, usually there's first-party data for 10% of their audience, right? But when a brand wants to work with you, they don't want to work with you for 10% of your audience. They want to take advantage of the full value of your audience. So I think that even if that percentage increases by 5% a year and eventually we have first-party data on 30, 40, 50% of our audience, we can make those programs more effective. But for right now, the scaling part of the conversation, because again, if you're Molson Coors, you don't want to be in front of those 2 people. You still want to be in front of those 20 million people that consume our brand every single day, and there has to be a trade-off, right? So first-party data is extremely important. It's super crucial for us from our side and their side, but at the same time, I think in most businesses, other than maybe in publishing, other than The Athletic, who has a very specific subscription-oriented business, it's the area of the business that has the least amount of scale.
Yeah, but I think that's what's unique about the data clean room solution. And that's the difference. So that's the old school way, and that was the challenge. That's why everyone failed. When we looked at Fan ID, we built an anonymous data clean room. So the difference around that is you're then delivering contextual personalization on an astronomical scale. We're not talking about 2, we're talking about 200 million. And that's the difference. And that's where data collaboration is a very different pathway to how it used to be. So what a data clean room is, and I'm not going to get too techie here, but this is a privacy-safe environment that anonymous data sources can come together. And what that means is then when a brand comes in, they're not just accessing one particular area, it's a substantial material-sized audience of the entire ecosystem related to either that sport or that team coming together anonymously, privacy-safe. So we are talking privacy, compliant, personalization at scale, which I've been dreaming of doing for decades, only enabled by first-party data.
Point taken. Similarly, and along that vein, do you feel at this moment in time there are any underutilized data points that people are not collecting that has the potential to give a real competitive advantage within your own respective areas?
I'll just throw one out. This is something we're working on at Monumental. It's a combination of data, of course, but kind of like a new fan score. Sort of not just how long we had somebody's information, but trying to nail down how long somebody's been a fan, or almost kind of what level of intensity fan they are. And I bring this up, this was actually spurred by some discussion around the alternate broadcasts we had last year. We did a number of them at the end of the year. You have some hosts, some local folks talking about the game's playing, you still have your main broadcast. We're talking about what does finding new customers look like, new fans? What does a new fan broadcast look like that over-explains, if you will, the concepts? It's not so intimidating to come in. I can actually choose the new fan broadcast that has, again, pops up, explains this play, this concept, whatever it may be. Maybe the host actually are kind of on that angle as well. And then we kind of have this score around new fans. We can actually target them for that broadcast, but also have some, content that's probably pretty basic, explaining things, and then target to them as well. So we're collecting a lot of data, of course, but kind of working around this sort of new fan score with our new D2C product, relatively new, to kind of see how we can match those up.
That's great.
I mean, one of the things for us that's very interesting is customer service interactions, right? Something you might not think of, but it's really important to hear customer sentiment, how they feel about your product. We also started something where a customer who registers for our product and they're not getting to the point of depositing, our CS agents will call that customer, will kind of understand kind of where they are in the process, why they might have registered and not deposited. All of this type of information really helps us understand our customers and then provide them more personalized experience kind of moving forward. So it's definitely something I would figure is kind of underutilized in the space. And another one is predictive events. So paycheck day, right? We're a online casino, understanding when customers are getting paid, right? Those are specific days that we can offer promotions, bonuses, different content, right? So those are sources that you might not kind of think off the top, but they've worked very well for us.
Yeah, I would add from our side in the content business, one of the areas that I think the industry on our side has moved a little bit slower than we probably should have is at the traffic source level. Right? So you get a traffic now from a ton of different places, social, search, homepage, app, whatever it may be, and there's a singular experience that delivers your product across, no matter where that traffic comes from. When the reality is, and when a person comes across your content on social, they're looking for a much different experience when they come to your site versus someone that comes to the homepage is probably one of your core users. But no matter which use case you are, you're all consuming the same experience. So I think that our community has been slower to adopt to making the experience defined by the traffic source because you know a lot more about that person based on where they came from. And I think we'll start to see a little bit more of that as we go forward.
That's awesome. Previous session, obviously very AI focused, but they did talk a lot about the hyper-personalization. We heard those panelists kind of take on how they feel AI can power those. But I'd be interested to kind of go down the line and see where you guys feel AI intersects with the hyper-personalized fan experience.
Yeah, massively. And I think Bashard in the original panel laid it out perfectly, where you almost have to split out the AI machine learning impact that's been on marketing technology for quite a considerable amount of time already. That is what is underpinning programmatic marketing, right? That has been there for a long period of time, effectively changing the way that people do connect and drive performance marketing. And then you talk about generative AI. And actually, on the creative side, it is having a really interesting impact. I mean, some of us would have seen the Azor demonstration. I think anyone who works in creative production was probably having tears in their eyes when they saw it, because those days of, going off to South Africa and doing a shoot for 3 weeks and then going to Cannes and sit on a yacht drinking rosé and enjoying the awards that come, they may be, coming down a little bit when you don't have to pay £5 million for a shoot, and you can actually just license a bit of software to create great creative. Now, completely agree with Rich, the creative is still fundamentally important, right? There's still the art with the science that's going to come into it. But when we think about what it means from advertising and marketing perspective, it's the depth of data points you can capture, and then it's the context which is drive effectiveness. Context is ultimately the key, and this, again, it's not new. Right? I actually think back to about 10 years ago, I used to work on Coca-Cola, and we had a data point which is around when the temperature hit a certain level, Coke sales went up, right? Not rocket science, right? Hot day, people are going to drink and buy an ice cold Coca-Cola. So this is in the early days of digital out of home. And what we're able to do is to trigger a deployment based around temperature, right? So quite simply, it's not rocket science. You had a placement. When it hit that figure, you got an ice cold glass of Coca-Cola, directional signage, in proximity, 20% sales uplift. The principles are the same, right? Right message, right time, right audience. AI is an enabler, an incredible tool that will then drive that effectiveness. And that's, as a marketeer, what I'm craving.
And I'll just add using AI for personalization, at Monumental, we're not there yet, but it's going to have to become just increasingly important for a number of reasons. We have a single direct-to-consumer product now at a monthly or an annual rate that serves all three of our professional teams, the Wizards, the Capitals, and the Mystics. So we don't have different segments set up for various business reasons, et cetera. We can just the Mystics, just the Caps, just the Wizards. So we actually have people buying our product at different times of the year, consuming different games. And one of the big rubs is actually those audiences actually don't overlap a lot. Maybe in some other cities, Philadelphia, you got a lot of everyone's a fan of all Philadelphia teams. DC is just a different city like that. So we actually have very different audiences coming to view our app. And also the other wrinkle on this, or just other data point, our streaming app has TV everywhere capability in addition to a direct-to-consumer offer, so folks can access that both ways. So we're serving 3 different professional team audiences. We're serving people who have paid us, people who haven't paid us. We're just now getting started on our data lake and things like that to personalize by team. Now you can gather information before when somebody signs up. I'm a Mystics fan, I'm a Wizards fan, and serve them like that. But we've got, I think like Adam said, we've got plans for really just next level things that are beyond sort of here's a single team category. Automated highlights, things like that, based on the players you pick, things like that are big things in the work. That said, that's tough. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm saying this, we don't have this set up right now. That's a lot of work. Are we gonna have this done this year? No. Next year? Sure, maybe. But it's gonna be just AI and personalization is just gonna be a fact of life for the success of our business going forward.
Yeah, and for us, we use kind of AI through personalization for a variety of different things. One example I'll give is dynamic UI and UXs in terms of homepage and league pages within our product, right? And a lot of people update their products that way. For us, we launched in Ohio in January 23. We were definitely seeing a trend in terms of local team handle. And with that trend, what we did is we created a dynamic homepage for Ohio, a tab in our homepage, where it aggregated all your player, your teams, and it created just a seamless experience for our customers to kind of get to the local bets that they wanted. And we kind of, Tipico being in 5 states, we have the flexibility to kind of showcase show like a hyper local brand. And that's what we tried to do. We wanted customers to come into our book and feel like they knew what they were coming into and that we knew them. And that was the goal of that. And then as many other, I believe, operators and publishers do, we also have dynamic operations on the league pages. We're able to look at trending bets, trending markets, and we're able to kind of bring that to the top for share of voice. So those are a few different ways that I would say we use AI to kind of power a personalized experience for our customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from our side, there's the personalized experience for consumers, but I think the area that we've benefited the most from the use of AI is the efficiencies in the business.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when we're distributing our content and we're working with other publishers to publish either the league rights we've acquired in the STN business or our content as a whole, it's using AI to power that content matching ecosystem. It's using AI to power the distribution. We operate hundreds of sites. You can't do a newsletter for every single site utilizing a human, but you can use AI to curate that and deliver the right message. So for us, there still are the same applicabilities that were mentioned by these guys, but I think AI is actually, the great writer, in my opinion, is never going to be replaced by AI. I think that sports is about opinion analysis and information. Yeah. There are certain parts of what a writer could do that could be interesting, right? Scores, where to watch, how to watch, all that type of content should be at some point automated. But AI for us is an efficiency inside of the business and how we utilize that technology to make our processes smoother and much more efficient. And I would say the writers and the content creators in our business that are using it correctly are actually seeing that they can do more with that technology than they were able to do prior.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, a lot of the back-end stuff is where people are seeing some big
Back end
benefits
for
in
us
the
has
industry.
been the area with the most investment.
And it keeps people less nervous about the safety of their jobs, I would think.
And just on that point, Jen, around creativity, because I think that's a really important point, because look, there's been a lot of anxiety in every single sector and industry around what it means for my role and my talent, and I think
Sure.
it's the role of creativity is still there. The mechanisms of how you're delivering that creativity is probably going to change and evolve, right? It's evolving from when people used to do advertising by a pen and paper and then get it on print to TV to digital. Now we're talking about creativity with potentially prompt design, and what does that mean in terms of the creative outputs? And there is a wonderful quote, I can't take personal credit for it, which was, I'm not worried about necessarily my job being replaced by AI, but you should be worried about your job being replaced by somebody else who can use AI. And that's the mentality probably to think about, even in the creative fields as well.
Right, it's a tool in the basket, and if you're properly tapping it, it's not going to take your job.
Yeah.
But it could make you much better at it.
There are other sectors that are going to be more challenged.
Impacted, yeah.
I think that sports as a sector, the best content in sports comes from broadcasters, it comes from athletes and influencers, and the best writers in our space. Of the sports content entirely becoming vanilla would essentially be less interesting to the average consumer. Right? So I think that for us, we got to lean into that as much as possible. Right? The content that is consumed the most is written by the people who people care about the most. Right? So I think there's a direct correlation there.
And that's a super important point, just to build on that from Rich, is sport has already been resilient from one of the big technological changes that kind of just bypassed our sector, which was the change from appointment to view to scheduled content. So if you think about how everything's now gone, the Netflix model on demand, the whole industry was underpinned by a TV schedule where you programmed. Sport is the constant, right? The games are still there. That's why the Super Bowl became the massive advertising moment, commercial moment that it is. So we've already been resilient. Sport is unique. It is passion. That is why collectively brands have spent billions sponsoring and activating sport, because it's an access point to an audience that cares about something. And that's the best way to then commercialize your product or service. So that's where everyone in this room connected to sport. That's something we should always remember, because it is a secret sauce. It's a weapon in the armory. And as we go into a future with all sorts of technological advancements we don't know is coming, sport will still be a constant. The question is, how will we harness it?
Yeah. And it makes sense. And the way you talk about it, how they're such a unique animal, if you will, with the passion. That's why you go towards the everything is an engagement strategy. But Chris talked about bringing in kind of the newer fans. Obviously, the idea is to make those long-term, long-engaged fans. And so what strategies do you guys feel you can use data for to cultivate them? I mean, Chris, you tapped on the one that Monumental's doing, obviously. But what other things can you do? And I'll throw it down to Rich, who is very passionate about content. I mean, what role does content play in that? You touched on it a little bit a couple of minutes ago. But in terms of fostering long-term engagement, where does content, how does that drive it?
So I'm going to try to be really short because the clock ticking.
We're going to lop into our Q&A a little bit.
I think that for us, it's about having a number of different ways and a number of different voices. I mean, right now we've expanded the business in a number of key areas. We can deliver information to users through the lens of the athlete. We can do it through the lens of the fan. We could do it through the authoritative writer with Sports Illustrated. We could do it through league content. So I think that for us, that diversification of how we can navigate that message, and ultimately the way each consumer use case may be different. You may be really interested in getting content from the Players Tribune because you love content that's created by athletes. We're totally fine with that. But I think for us, we have enough variety now that it allows us to then reach a lot of audiences that perhaps in the past we couldn't achieve.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, from our standpoint, when I think about long-term engagement, I think about both loyalty programs and user journeys. So from a user journey perspective, we are constantly optimizing our user journey and learning about our customers, right? So in addition to what, if you think about an operator, just adjusting like frequency, stake, type of bet, on top of that, we survey customers initially to kind of understand what their interests are. We configure kind of understanding what they're betting, and we provide content based on that. So we're completely optimizing our user journey based on consistently understanding the customer base, trying to create long-term value. And from a loyalty program perspective, making every stake count, having a program that every time a user bets that they're getting intrinsic value, whether that be through kind of content and understanding what they like, whether that be through promotions or bonuses. Those are ways that we've found value, and we've seen success in our 90-day retention rates from those two programs.
And I'll just add, for Monumental, we have our long-term customers at the high company level are our season ticket members. They pay us the most money. They stick around the longest.
Sure.
So it's interesting having that operation and then having the TV direct-to-consumer. Have we figured out how that fully connects yet? No, we haven't, but there's some back and forth on that. But we have our long-term folks, those season ticket members, we've got a lot of data on them.
Yeah.
We'll be adding just more of that data around the streaming, perhaps creating some bespoke experiences for them from the network. Different things like that. But yeah, I mean, season ticket members are our big long-term push.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the only thing, I agree with everything previously said, the only thing to add really from a Sportradar perspective, when you think about long, it all comes down to classic brand strategy, right? Brand strategy and then engagement. And within that, you have a number of marketing mix toolkits that you can tap into. Whether that is driving shorter term efficiency through promotions. That's where we've seen great efficiency. We're talking about AI again. We have Sportradar ads, which is essentially driving the efficiency and effectiveness of targeting bettors. So minimizing wastage. So that's a really good short-term example. But then it can also then add context in terms of messaging, which is then building the brand over the long term. So that's the way you kind of have to look at your marketing mix, is to say, right, what's your overarching brand strategy? What is your business objective? And how does the different pieces of the puzzle come together between the short term, mid-term, and long term?
Wonderful. We've well run over time, and we want to give everybody a chance to ask questions if they have any. So we'll open it up to our Q&A portion. Just raise a hand if you do, and somebody will grab you with a mic. That gentleman.
Mine's for Rich, but it could open up to the panel, but it's just off something you were talking about earlier, automating and publishing some of those more mundane tasks in sports, obviously scores or game happenings. I'm curious how close you think we are to being able to apply generative AI in that way, in a way that is accurate, in a way that is represents a seamless user experience, because I know there have been some hiccups kind of in that deployment over the last couple of years.
To say the least. I don't know. I don't want to make a prediction on how close we are, but I will say that, if you were a writer 10 years ago, utilizing an open source CMS, a WordPress, a Drupal, whatever it may be, you probably kept another 10 windows open. One of them was a YouTube clip to embed, Twitter, and you had all these. You had to keep essentially 19 windows open in order to create a single piece of content. Right? And I think that a lot of that has been replaced by CMSs that are more fully integrated, but also really interesting content matching tools, where when you've created a really interesting piece of content, you can now utilize AI to find the right pieces to make up the rest of that section. Right? So the drag and drop days, the having to find this quiz here, whatever it may be, if your staff of writers, and we have a lot of content creators in the business, have to have those 10 windows open to finish a single piece of content, there's no way you're going to be able to deliver content at scale. So maybe we are a few years away from being able to use generative AI in the fashion that you've outlined. But I think that shouldn't stop us in being more efficient at the point of that individual piece of content. And I think that's what we're focused on right now.
Anyone else? We have a few minutes, and there was actually one question we did not get to, so I'd like to hit that if I could, because Evan and Adam, I'd like you both to talk about this in terms of your relationship working together. Kind of the best ways the different parties can collaborate on data analysis for some mutually beneficial campaigns, and I know that you two have worked together, so I'd love if you could speak on that relationship.
Yeah, I'll start. So Tipico and Sportradar in the past have had data sharing agreements, right? That is kind of the best way for an operator, an affiliate, a publisher to collaborate, right? And what that enables is kind of the way that we work together is that Tipico enables their first-party audiences to be sent to the publisher, right, Sportradar. And Sportradar can do a few different things with that based on the campaign strategy. Our campaign strategy, one, was from a prospecting perspective, where they take our first-party data, right, they put it into a warehouse, right, and they're expanding that with their audience. So they're taking our data, they're building lookalikes off our first-party data, they're adding their audience data on top of that, and that scales our prospecting efforts. The other way that we've really kind of pushed forward and has been very successful as well is from a retargeting standpoint. Here we take niche audiences, niche first-party audiences. So think about if it's the time of Wimbledon, we'll take a churn tennis audience, right? MLB will take churn baseball audiences, and we'll take those specific audiences and we'll work with Sportradar to, in their dynamic creative, to target those players with specific matchups of a baseball game. If they're parlay bettors, we'll do parlays, same game parlays. There's different ways that we can optimize that data within their dynamic creative set. So we're consistently personalizing our messaging and our creative for that specific retained audience. And building frequency against a retained audience is the best way to bring them back. And we've seen that be highly successful as well.
One part around the relationship we've forged with, so obviously we do upper funnel, and then we're talking about lower funnel stuff here. And I've been much more happy the last couple of years around the level of insights the partner would provide. Right? So in previous years, you would work with a ticket partner, a OTT partner, a sports betting partner, and they're signing you up for KPIs. Right? We want you to deliver this number of customers. You send them a whole bunch of stuff, and you have no idea what the heck happened. You didn't convert anybody, and to be fair, it was this box of information that no one was willing to share. We've kind of reached a point now on our side where if you're not willing to share information, there's no deal. It's just not worth it. I need to know when I'm sending somebody to you, what happens? At what point in the user journey did they fall off? What can we do to re-engage that customer? Because I'm not going to sign up for KPIs unless I get access to the same level of data that you have. Sometimes that leads to no deal. Right? But I'll tell you from our side, at this point, it either needs to go both ways or it's not worth the money. Right? So I think we've taken that approach and totally been much more helpful because we know if we're signing up for something that they have an obligation to share to help us be successful.
And just on that collaboration point, both
Please.
what Evan and Rich have said there, I think is a really good example of the changing perspective about collaboration and data. And this is where I think the success is ultimately going to come for the future when it comes to first-party data. Because that is a mentality, as Rich was saying, that just didn't exist. It was very, very transactional. And that mentality, what Evan was talking about, that may have not happened 5-10 years ago. But the level of effectiveness that's coming out because of collaboration, it's taking multiple data sources and driving a better outcome and driving effectiveness and efficiency. So I think, and the other point that what Evan was talking about there, which I think is also important to address, which is both the acquisition and the retention side of marketing. So we all get kind of caught up sometimes in the acquisition marketing because it's sexy, right? It's exciting. It's the new. But I always remember a quote from one of my first bosses. He said, good marketeers think about acquisition. Great marketeers will think about acquisition and retention equal measure. And when we talk about personalization, what you're really talking about there is maximizing value out of a buyer, out of a shopper, out of a consumer, out of a fan. And that is really where collaboration, data, and technology as a combination is going to unlock a serious amount of possibilities for the future. And when businesses, whether that's leads, whether it's rights holders, whether that's teams, whether that's brands, have the attitude and understanding that data collaboration is going to drive success, the future is very, very exciting. Right? It's just having the technology is just the infrastructure. It's the framework that enables it. That's again, just to wrap that up, Sportradar Fan ID is the technology. It is the infrastructure. What it needs is the partnerships to enable success. So hopefully that mentality of there is a big, bold future ahead of us. We need all of you in this room and our other partners to see that, address that, work to each other. And sport has the most amazing opportunity in this new era of first-party data.
I think that sums it up nicely. I think we ran a little over, so unless anybody had a last-minute question they thought of, we'll probably break. Once again, there's call. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Ken Williams with the Azor. So I was wondering if AI becomes too predictive, where does the value lie in companies such as a betting website or anything that uses, I guess, maybe someone's not too precise, predictions in order to make money?
Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to take the mic?
We've got people trying to use this to beat the books, and generally books are kicking them out. Obviously, we're well aware of the Radar product, and people that use that generally don't allow these people that use the artificial intelligence, the modeling, all these things from professional bettors to actually play into their product. But most of these models, you still need the human interaction. I think we're far, far off being able to plug in who wins Buffalo versus New York, and being able to achieve that.
Yeah, we did it March Madness, SBJ, Joe Lemire. We had AI do our bracket for us to see how it did. Joe, where'd you come? Right middle of the pack? Yeah, far from a winner when AI took the reins there. So yeah, I agree completely.
So, like you said, it does, right now, AI isn't at the point where it could, predict it. But say it does get to the point where it does predict it, where's the value in certain companies that, are like betting websites?
Well, one of my thoughts, it's tough for me to even kind of get to the point of entertaining the idea that, can kind of predict that, predict a game or the outcome. I feel like my first reaction was kind of the inherent nature of sports and why it's valuable, like you mentioned, versus on-demand programming. It's the unpredictability of it, right? And almost the nature of why we're talking about live games is almost why it can't be fully predictive.
Right, the play you never saw coming.
Was my initial kind of reaction to that.
I was going to say the same thing. NBA lines in particular. The last 2 minutes of the game really is all that matters. And I think it's the day that sports becomes predictable and you can forecast who's going to win X, Y, and Z and run away with it. I think I'm not so sure that AI will have all those answers either. But I imagine that'll hurt your margins.
It will.
So I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
Or really ever.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And look, here's the real truth of the matter. And look, there's a big part of Sportradar that services the sports betting industry. So it's not the bettors and the punters that are going to be taking advantage of it. It's going to be the betting operators, because they're going to have the products and services, the data points to set the odds. And the odds really is the catalyst, right? It's about setting the odds based on the predictability and the predictive models. That's how betting works. It's how
I
betting.
think you've seen a lot of that in daily fantasy, actually. You know, where you can cover the board utilizing a model, get all the right players into the right lineups, and you have a chance of doing X, Y, and Z. But I think for sports betting, it's far more challenging.
Yeah. Thank you for that. With that, we're going to conclude this session to keep everything on track. Again, there are coffee and refreshments up at the top of the steps. Thank you, Adam, Chris, Evan, Rich. Very helpful.
Yes.